The YPT production of Bugsy Malone is adapted from the film of that name, and while it must be said the switch doesn't quite work, it was still a terrific effort. Bugsy is a fantasy piece where children play adult gangsters and their moles, and it's a charming notion. But the play is a bit short on plot, and where the film can gloss over this, on the stage the gaps show. As well, there are just too many scene changes for an amateur company to cope with successfully, and some of Paul Williams' beautiful songs are just a bit too difficult for young voices. I might add that in the film they were dubbed in by adults. But on to the more positive points. First-time director Catherine Hill handled her cast of thousands with imagination and skill, and all of the major actors and most of the minor ones gave their parts real energy, style and flair. They really captured the gangland feel. And some of the big production numbers, notably We Could Have Been Anything We Wanted to Be and Down and Out, were real entertainment. Bugsy Malone was a highly ambitious project for YPT, but I'd much rather see kids aim high and maybe not get there 100% than settle for something ordinary.
Animated cartoons for the
Walkley
ABC
Awards for Excellence in Australian Journalism were first held in 1956 and were designed to uphold the standard of news reporting Australia-wide. William Walkley, founder of Ampol Petroleum, established the annual awards, and this year it was Newcastle's turn to host them. Amongst the distinguished guests present was the Premier, Mr Neville Wran, who spoke about the need to constantly maintain a high standard of news reporting.
Well, so much for the print media.
In the 26 years since the establishment of the Walkley Awards, there's been a flowering and diversification of journalism in Australia, which more than justifies Sir William Walkley's confidence in it.
Australian detective
Journalists
wanted for
from all
armed
over the
robbery
country
and
have
rape.
gathered
Colin
in
Tyrus has done a lot
Newcastle
in
to
his
pick up their
29 years.
respective bronze
He began his
awards
radio
covering
journalism
both
career with
print
3
and
AW in
electronic
Melbourne in
media.
the set. Colin Tyrus. David Jones.
Perhaps the highlight of the evening, though, was the presentation of the Gold Award for the year's Best Piece of Journalism. This prestigious award was won by Kerry O'Brien from the Seven Network in Sydney for his 90-minute documentary entitled Circle of Poison. The exhibition of student work from various high schools in the Hunter Valley was organised by the Institute of Industrial Arts together with the Newcastle College of Advanced Education. After officially opening the exhibition, the Regional Director of Education, Mr Alan Beard, presented awards of merit to students whose work has been judged to the highest standard. 130 students had work represented in the exhibition made out of various mediums including wood, metal, technical drawings or non-trade materials. And judging by the works on show, the Hunter region can certainly boast a high standard in the industrial arts area.
For their first lap, at off 11 o'clock, the 10 runners were joined by some of the spastic children it's hoped will benefit from the jockeying. The runners, 8 RAF members and 2 civilians, hope public support for their 24-hour run will be shown in the form of donation. And the first to do that today is the Lord Mayor, who kicked the fund off with a cheque for $20. Pounding the pavement is nothing new for members of the running team. All compete regularly in marathons and train over distances of 100 kilometres or so each week. However, they know it'll be hard to keep up the pace right through the night, and so they've issued an open invitation to the public to call in, cheer them on and make a donation.
And all the other things. Mr Ted Harris was speaking to guests at today's first luncheon organised by the revamped Newcastle Media Club. He predicted a new quest in the search for oil in Australia, believing many companies found other forms of energy too costly. Mr Harris also criticised government interference in the oil pricing structure and failure to abide by the referee's decision, in this case the Federal Pricing Authority.
One thing I would say to you, though, and that is this, and I've said it many times recently, that where this country refuses to accept the decisions of umpires, this country is getting itself into an awful mess. Some state governments believe that they have the right, that where the umpire's decision doesn't suit them, to make arbitrary decisions to set lower maximum prices than those determined by the federal authority. This, I suggest to you, has all sorts of dangers. It's clearly in many instances done for straight-out political purposes.
On the industrial relations front, Mr Harris said widespread differences remain unresolved in the oil industry. He claimed the number one troublemaker was demarcation within the industry's large group of unions.
Crude oil.
Today's meeting had been called to protest at the state government's Sydney Draft and Regional Environment Plan, together with the Draft Urban Consolidation Plan. Residents of the Gosford area fear they will directly be affected by the proposals and are being used by the government as a guinea pig to gauge public reaction to its urban consolidation proposals. Mrs Margaret Toms, a spokesperson for the group, outlined the aims of today's meeting.
It is a protest meeting. The people of the Central Coast, and we are delighted by the amount of people who have appeared here today. They are here to protest in volume, to tell the Minister for State Planning and Environment, Mr Bedford, and the state government that there's no way we want this type of development on the Central Coast.
And how would the character of Gosford be affected if the plan did go ahead?
Well, there are so many things. I mean, the infrastructure of Gosford here at the moment, we can't move on our roads. Our hospital, we have Mr Boyce of the Gosford District Hospital here speaking today. He is against any extra development of the area because the hospital is to capacity now. There's evidently no more money to be spent in this area on hospitals for a minimum of 5, approximately 7 years.
The one thing that the government hasn't said is how much the 4-minute ferry ride to Stockton will cost, but they've indicated that fares will be comparable to those charged on Sydney Harbour, and on that basis it seems that the one-way fare will be about 60 cents. The new service, to be operated by the Urban Transit Authority, won't begin until at least January. The government says it will take that long to get everything organised. Initially, 2 150 passenger vessels will be chartered, but within 2 years of the takeover, 2 brand new ferries, worth around $150,000 each at current cost, will be introduced to the run. The plan is for the ferry to operate at 20-minute intervals in peak periods and on the half hour at other times. Monday to Friday, the service will run from 6 a.m. until 10 p.m. On Saturdays, it will be extended until midnight. While on Sundays and holidays, the timetable will be 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. The fuselage of the aircraft, with one wing still attached, slammed into the ground in a park that's right behind the main street of Gloucester. The 4 people on board died instantly in the badly crushed cabin. Although petrol spilled from the ruptured tank into a creek, there was no fire, but firemen still had to take the precaution of blanketing the area with foam. The wrecked aircraft was a Piper Warrior, a low-wing, single-engine 4-seater. Based at Cessnock, the plane was on a flight to Casino. The owner of the aircraft, John Blackwell of Cessnock, rushed to the crash scene by helicopter when he heard the news. Witnesses on the ground said they heard the aircraft apparently in trouble in low cloud for minutes before the crash.
Into a deep dive noise and then a bit of a puff, and that was about it, no smoke or anything.
So he actually came out of the cloud in pieces?
He just come out, when he come out, he was in the two pieces when he come out. And he's done a few cartwheels and then sort of just slid away then into the ground. Actually, we thought he was going to land on Campbell Shed.
The wing which parted from the aircraft fell more than a kilometre away in the backyard of a house. The owners were at a nearby property when they heard the crash spilled from and arrived home to find the wing strung up in a fruit tree. Other small parts of wreckage were scattered nearby. It's only really now, as the accident investigation teams, the police scientific squad and others move into the area, that the 2,500 residents of Gloucester are realising just how lucky they were. Because it was only luck that brought the remains of the aircraft down here in the park and not down in the main street of the town, in one of the nearby garages, or into someone's home. The 13 episodes of the second series of Beating Around the Bush were shot in just 8 weeks, and by international production standards, that's an achievement in itself. Already shown on NBN, the series has now been purchased by the Nine network. But even so, the star Ian Hill didn't dream of international recognition.
Well, we didn't really think so, Jim, to start with. We were particularly pleased that it even got finalist status in an international competition. And we're, of course, very pleased that we got a little further than that.
It's gone a long way further. Do you think that this might take the program, the type of program that you put together, further?
Well, I'd sincerely like to hope so. I think that's in the lap of the gods, really. I think the fact that we deviate the course of a standard didactic type documentary with having Art Ryan there representing the viewer and a more laid-back fashion rather than pumping information in, letting them see it happen with a bit of action, a bit of entertainment. It's a bit of a precedent even for Australia, really.
Are you chasing other awards this year?
Well, we're off to the Penguins on Saturday morning for the Penguin Awards on Saturday night. We've nominated down there in 2 categories and hoping that we'll pick something up down there as well, yeah.
We've had reports that there is supposed to be stoppages each Monday from here onwards, but I believe it will be confined to certain sites and mainly in the metropolitan areas of most of the capital cities. I don't really think it will affect our sites in Newcastle.
What sort of negotiations have been going on with the union over this issue?
Currently we're negotiating the new award, which finishes in February 1983. This one has got 3 to 4 months to run. And I believe that all they're trying to do is to intimidate us in the usual way to say that there will be some reduction in hours. Now, we have already stated quite plainly to all those involved that there will be no reduction in hours in 1983.
The community is getting over the 38-hour week campaign and the costs involved with introducing that. How do you think the 36-hour week will be accepted?
I think the 38-hour week in itself has been a disaster, and any reduction to 36-hour week would only accelerate what is already a very depressed situation.
Would it add costs to buildings?
Oh, of course it would, and that's the problem. I think most people and most unions realise that there is a real problem in that regard. But by intimidation under these circumstances, well, it's just not on. All our sites will be open on Monday, and I think we'll be working as normal.
The drums belong to a contractor for a Victorian paint company. He was granted temporary permission to store them on the site in 1978. 4 years later, they are still there. Many of the drums are badly corroded and the contents are leaking out. Residents say, as well as being a fire hazard, the wastes may have an irreversible effect on the environment. The Wyong Shire Council has set up a committee to examine possible disposal methods. However, there is disagreement within the council over just how urgent the situation is. Wyong Shire President Mr Tim Farrell.
We must realise that these drums are surrounded by a 7 to 8 foot bung wall, and even if a fire did occur there would be no immediate danger to the township or Wyong. I think the nearest residence to the drums is a quarter of a mile away, and I'm sure that our well-known fire brigades and bushfire brigades would have it under control anyway.
Deputy Shire President Mr Paul Levick doesn't see it that way.
I'm quite surprised the President made that statement because obviously he hasn't completely read this document. It's beyond me why he would make it. And can I state Inspector Wood of the Board of Fire Commissioners that's part of this report, where he says he confirmed that the material of the airstrip is particularly vulnerable to fire and inflammable vapours are escaping. Motorbikes and aeroplanes in the area are obviously at risk.
Behind me there are 23,000 drums filled with chemical waste. It's been estimated that the cost of removing those drums is $250,000. So who picks up the tab? There are three choices: the owner of the drums, the Wyong Shire Council or the state government. However, many of the residents of Wyong believe that the responsibility lies with the government.
The accident was a good lesson to car drivers to stay well clear of big loads as they round bends. This massive electric motor was being carried from BHP to Borkum Scrap Metals when a supporting wooden block split just as the low loader rounded the curve into the New England highway. As that happened, the 9 supporting chains snapped like carrots and the 30-tonne load crashed onto the roadway. Fortunately, the only damage was to the roadway. The most serious consequence was a traffic tangle that kept police busy trying to explain to drivers that they couldn't go this way and had to go that way.
What do you know of your opponent for tonight's fight?
Well, he's not to be taken easy. He's a pretty experienced boy, knows what has to be done, and he's tough.
Last time we saw you in Newcastle, you were co-commentating at the Commonwealth Games, and before that, as one of the lead-up fights to the Berrigan-Malcolm fight, and on that particular night you had a pretty easy win. The form looked good.
Yeah, it was an easy fight up at the basketball stadium, and it was even easier up at the Commonwealth Games. I wish it was that easy tonight.
Jeff Malcolm is a fighter in town with another mission. He wants a crack at the Australian junior welterweight title, and badly.
Yeah, I'm here to challenge Peter Berrigan for my Australian title that he's been running around with for so long.
Well, he holds the title, but you firmly believe it's yours, don't you?
Well, I think he's a plastic champion, mate. He's never really... Well, outside of Newcastle, you can't get him outside of Newcastle. So he went to Korea and got knocked out because he left Newcastle. I think he's homesick once he gets past Belmont, mate. So I'd like to fight him again. Hopefully the promoters here can do it.
The ABF rules are that he must defend, I believe, by the 5th of December. Yes. No sign of that yet, though.
Well, see, the ABF have got rules to suit themselves, mate. I was Australian champion. I defended the title 3 times in 6 weeks, which is a record. And this guy's champion, mate, and he just hides. It's unbelievable how a guy can run around and call himself a champion. It's unbelievable. So I'd like to see Berrigan get in the ring, mate. Look, I'll fight him out in the street, mate. Doesn't worry me. punch. I retaliated by throwing my head at him. It never landed, but Kim McCain, who I'd just like to say, Kim McCain is a former Wild Bentley fighter who I stopped up here for the state lightweight title. In fact, the police stopped the fight up here at Newcastle West a few years ago, and he took a point off me for using my head. It's just unbelievable. They got their own rules, and I'd like to see Berrigan get in the ring, mate. You know, look, I'll fight him out in the street, mate. It doesn't worry me.
Computerised sales are not new. However, property transactions in Australia have been electronic for only a year. Today, the system was launched in Newcastle by the Sydney firm Private Property Listings of Australia. Selling property by computer is simple. Property details are entered into the computer where they are compared with buyers' requirements. When matches are found, printouts of the properties are sent to all prospective buyers. The franchise manager of Private Property Listings, Mr. Simon Rigby, says the new system has proved a success.
12 months that it's been operating in Australia, it's been highly successful. It's now operated in 8 capital cities throughout the country, and it's been operating in the UK for over 3 years, where it's become the biggest single method of buying and selling property.